This is a Willets Point Shea Stadium bound 7 express train. The next and last stop is Willets Point, Shea Stadium.
Oh, yes, it is the Subway to Shea podcast. Anthony Rivera here with you, talking about all the news and happenings surrounding that team from Queens, the New York Mets. It's episode 239 from the Subway to Shea studios in my office. Make sure you're following Subway to Shea on X, Instagram, and TikTok at Subway to Shea. You can follow me personally at AntRivera86. And subscribe to the podcast, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, if you prefer to listen to the show. But if you want to be a part of the chat, you want to be a part of the conversation, you're doing that right here on YouTube. You could also do it on X as well, but YouTube is the place to be. Shout out to everyone that's in the room and in the chat right now. Sports Nut Nick, Jeff Cohen, Green Machine, Brad. Hope you guys are doing well, and it is officially begun. Spring training is here. Met spring training is here. Pitchers and catchers, everyone actually is in the house now, and here to break that down with me today. He's down there in Port St. Lucie. It's Max Goodman. Make sure you're following Max at Max T. Goodman, Mets beat reporter for NJ Advance Media. Max, how you doing, my friend?
Anthony, I'm great. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
I said this off the air. I'll say once again, congrats on jumping over to Queens from the Bronx.
I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be an exciting year for this team, I think, one way or the other, right? I've heard about some interesting Mets seasons in the past, but I think that a lot of the moves that this team has made in recent months, they're positioned to at least be in a place where they can contend this year. We'll see how it goes. We'll see how healthy they stay. But I can definitely envision this roster going pretty deep into the playoffs.
Yeah, it's definitely an offseason that made, you could say, a lot of fans uncomfortable, but possibly something that needed to be done that, who knows, in the past with previous general managers, previous owners, maybe it would not have been done. So at least the Mets were on top of it and wanted to make moves. And we have a kind of overhaul of this roster. I got to ask you right off the top, what are your initial takeaways from the first couple of days of Mets camp?
Oh, man, there's so many, Anthony. I mean, let's start with all the new faces, right? I mean, Freddie Peralta lights up the clubhouse when he comes in there. I haven't had a chance to really talk with him yet, but his personality is pretty contagious. It stands out how he's constantly hanging out with Francisco Alvarez behind home plate during live BPs. And you see, Bo Bichette showing off the offense at the plate, seeing some live pitching and already, going the other way. He hit that homer off of Peralta a couple days ago at this point. Jorge Polanco can definitely swing the bat as well. He's been putting the ball in play a lot. And I guess while I mentioned those two guys, it brings me to just thinking about what this lineup is going to be capable of. And it's kind of a new look offense. I obviously didn't watch this team every day last year, but the sense that I got looking at numbers is that they were pretty reliant on power. And I think that the depth in this lineup now, with a lot more bat to ball skill in there, it can be a deeper order. Obviously, there's plenty of upside, and there are a lot of ifs in there too. But when you look beyond Lindor and Soto now, there's more protection in different types of ways, I guess is how I look at it. But obviously, the position players haven't even officially reported yet. That's tomorrow morning. So we'll see as more batters get in there and see how their springs go. We'll have a better idea.
Yeah, that seemed to have been the problem last season where, obviously you had the power bat of Pete Alonso, which is hard to replace, Brandon Nimmo getting on base, but this team never seemed to work at bats like they should have. Always quickly out of innings. I mean, I can get up and get a drink of water and the half inning would be over already. Offensively, now you got a couple of bats in there that maybe will work more counts, maybe get on base in, like you said, in different ways and are able to score runs in different ways than just going for the home run ball.
I think the other way to look at that too, and I alluded to this a little bit, I think the floor is pretty high when you look at Bichette and Polanco. Those guys are proven hitters. Yeah. But the ceiling, when you factor in the Luis Robert Jr. trade, the Mark Vientoses of the world, Brett Beatty, can they take a step forward? Obviously Carson Bench too, and we don't really know what we're going to see from him and if he's going to start the year with the big league club. But Alvarez, can he put together a full season? Can he stay healthy? The second half of the lineup could turn this team into one of the best on offense, a really high octane lineup, or you start to see more trends from the last several years, and then you wonder if they did enough on offense. But I will say, Anthony, it all comes back to pitching too. And I learned that from these last several years on the Yankees beat. That rotation was such an issue for the Mets at the end of last year that what is Peralta enough of an impact acquisition with, a step forward from Nolan McLean and whoever else is going to be in that rotation? And does the bullpen actually pan out? As we talk through this, there are a lot of ifs, as I've already said, but the potential is definitely there.
Well, I want to start off the whole talk with what had happened at the beginning, right off the bat with David Stern's press conference. We talked about, Francisco Lindor and the need to have surgery on his left hamate bone, which, that stress fracture, we've seen it before. We've seen it with Francisco Alvarez. Took him about 6 to 8 weeks to get ready. But I read your conversation with the orthopedic doctor from NYU Langone. And he said it could possibly take 8 to 10 weeks, just to feel 100% without pain. Now, does that include baseball activities? Because obviously he's going to have to grip the ball. He's going to have to, play defense. Is it 8 to 10 weeks just on rest, or 8 to 10 weeks to feel 100%, even if he does do some activities?
Right. My understanding with that from that interview with the doctor that I spoke to was he's not going to necessarily feel 100% for that long. The power might not be back right away at that 6-week mark, but the 6-week timeline that the Mets gave, that does factor in plenty of time to get back to being game ready. It's just a question of what version of Francisco Lindor would be ready to step in against Paul Skeens in the bottom of the first inning on March 26th. So it sounds like he's the kind of player that goes out there and plays through injuries, right? Again, in my first year on the beat, that's the reputation that I've gathered. And, that's really admirable. You look at his baseball reference page and he's playing in 150 plus games every year. That's rare nowadays. So you want that out of your leader and your, captain-like presence in the clubhouse. But also with an injury like this, you don't want to risk anything else happening. And I think that's why the Mets went ahead and had this surgery done, because if you keep playing with this stress reaction, and this is what I learned from the doctor that I spoke to, you're more at risk for breaking that hamate bone down the road. And then you start to think of the snowball of how many more weeks and possibly months he could miss, or how much longer it'll take for him to get back to his true self.
Yeah, it's good to take care of that now while we're in the, spring training when games really don't matter. And he'll have time to heal. He doesn't have to rush back. He doesn't, because, Francisco Alvarez, it kind of felt like he had to rush back. We had the backup catchers, but we really needed his presence back in the lineup. And maybe we rushed him back too soon. So at least here, it could actually be kind of a true 6 to 8 weeks of rest, of healing, and then also getting amped up for activities. Now he's also coming off of the minor elbow procedure that he had as well. That was the real reason that kept him out of the WBC. It's not the hand issue is what I heard there. And the fact that even Bad Bunny was going to pay for his insurance to go to the WBC, as well, as we found out today how true that was. But with Lindor too, talking about, even in his past, he had the foot injury last season. He had the really bad back injury towards the end of 2024 and still came through at the end of the season and played in that pain. So he is very tolerable to whatever the pain it is that he is. He will play through it all. And I have no doubt he will be back. Even if it's not opening day, he will be back earlier on in the season, at least in the first month of the season. Now, who replaces Lindor as shortstop for this time? Right off the bat, they took out Bo Bichette because he's got to play third and he's got to get comfortable. We'll get into Bo Bichette a little bit shortly. But the names that we've heard, even from Carlos Mendoza and David Stearns, Ronnie Mauricio, he's my pick right now. I want to see the most out of Ronnie Mauricio while we're there. Obviously, Vidal Brujan is in there, but he's more of kind of a backup, bench type player. Christian Arroyo's in there, Jackson Clough, and Greg Kissinger. Now, Mauricio, as you stated, was working extensively at shortstop during the first couple of days. The other thing with him is he still has one final minor league option left. So I don't know how much that factors into, let's say Lindor does miss time at the beginning of the season and they need to carry shortstop. I don't know how much that figures into the decision-making when it comes to Ronnie Mauricio.
Well, I think it's very pertinent to bring up that minor league option because, they can send him down. And I think that it's also worth noting the knee injury that he had and the time that he missed, right? I mean, this is a former highly touted prospect that really hasn't had an extended stretch in the big league, picture in terms of playing time. So I think that the way that the Mets are looking at this is they got to let him play. And so even beyond spring training, if there's really no role for him in the big leagues, it would be a mistake to just have him ride the bench and not continue to develop. It reminds me a little bit of the, Jason Dominguez situation with the Yankees, right? Like the talent is there, maybe not as talented as Jason Dominguez, depending on who you talk to and ask, but you want these young guys to go out there and actually have a chance to evolve and get used to facing big league pitching on a daily basis. So if that's not out there for Mauricio, then, he probably ends up in AAA and you can stick a Brujan or somebody else that you bring in to be that guy who rides the bench all week and maybe makes a couple appearances in a pinch hit or late game defensive sub type of situation. So all 5 of those names that you mentioned, we will see those guys a lot in Grapefruit League play. These games, the score doesn't matter. They're just essentially filling out the spots on the lineup card and seeing what they have with those players, because you never know who could get called up from AAA in the future. But eventually we will see Lindor. I think my next question on this topic is, how does he build that chemistry and cohesion with Marcus Semien, the new second baseman, because that's an important part of the puzzle for this team with all the run prevention focus from this past offseason. Semien is, of course, an elite defender at second. Lindor at his best is elite at shortstop too. So in theory, they'll gel just fine, but they need those reps in spring training to get used to it, playing with each other. And the other parts of the infield, which I'm sure we'll get into, there are some question marks there too.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because that's up next. Let's talk about the new look infield that the Mets have here. And Bo Bichette right off the bat, they were there at the start of the week. Bo Bichette learning third base. You got Polanco at first base. A lot of instruction from Carlos Mendoza and Kai Correa, who is going to be helping out these infielders. And Thursday, they worked really closely with Bo, giving him a lot of feedback and instruction. Can you let us know like what they were deep working on with Bo while he was out there on the field?
Well, I wish that I was out there with them, because that would be fascinating to hear exactly what was being said. But it seems like the biggest adjustment for Bichette so far, and something that they're working on going from short to third, is timing. And if you're deep in the shortstop hole, you got to get rid of the ball as quickly as possible. Whereas at third, it's called the hot corner for a reason. The ball's going to get to you a lot quicker, and he might have a little extra time. It's only a second, but that goes a long way if you can take an extra step or shuffle, gather and make that accurate and strong throw. So Mendoza was out there with a stop clock, a stopwatch, like timing how long those reps were taking for Bichette as he gets used to it. But also we're at Valentine's Day. It's still early February. The videos that we're seeing on Twitter that I'm posting and other writers are posting, like, give him a little bit more time. He's making this transition. He's able to go from shortstop to other positions, I'm sure. And I think that I say that, but obviously it's a very important storyline for this team this spring to see just how he's going to handle that.
Yeah, and game time is going to be a whole lot different. It's more intense. The plays are going to come quickly, i.e. you got to think quickly. With Polanco too as well, what do you think that, be the biggest challenge for him? I saw him scooping at first base. I mean, that's something that, I know Pete Alonso gets a lot of flack for his defense, and, rightfully so. But one thing that he was great at was scooping at first, especially with the infield that the Mets had. Now he's going to have Bo Bichette at third. You'll have Lindor, obviously, as the defender that you talked about, as well as Marcus Semien, a little bit better defenders there. So what is Polanco's biggest challenge for him in manning that corner at first base?
It's funny, Anthony. You can basically say that there are 4 shortstops on this infield.
Yeah, you can.
Semien's a former shortstop too. Polanco has played all over the infield in his career. So that's not really the prototypical infield. It's not the model infield, but the Mets really like the hands from all of these guys. They trust that they can make those transitions, and they know what they have up the middle. And for Polanco, it's kind of like Bichette in the sense that Bichette's working on timing. Polanco has to work on footwork and different positioning. It's a new glove that he's using over there. I think that the Mets can trust that after time, he'll be able to make those picks and have the hands. It's just, where does he stand on pickoff plays? Where is he when there's a bunt play and he has to know, okay, it's X pitcher on the mound and he's not as good at getting to a ball on the, first base side on the shallow infield. Maybe Polanco is the one that has to go out and get that versus staying back on other plays. So it's just very different, right? I mean, and that's the transition that he's going to make. And we're going to see him out there taking ground balls just like Bichette and everybody else on a daily basis this spring, because that's something that he's got to make sure is ironed out before opening day.
Mark Vientos as well. He did play shortstop in the minor leagues, and Brett Beatty. They're also getting reps at first base, and it'll be interesting to see how they acclimate themselves as well. With Jorge Polanco, who's probably going to get most of the reps there, but there's got to be playing time for Mark Vientos and Brett Beatty if they're on this roster, which I assume that they will be. Probably Mark Vientos more at DH. And Brett Beatty more of the utility man. How do you think things work out for them at the start of spring so far?
Well, it's a trickle down effect in terms of the roster, in terms of how I look at it. With maybe we can even start with Carson Bench, right? If he makes the team, he's going to start, he's going to play, which then means that Beatty's not your everyday outfielder. And then if Beatty's not playing in the outfield and you want his bat in the order, then really the only spot would be either DH or first base. And it sounds like Polanco is playing a lot of first base. So if Beatty's at DH more often, then that means that Vientos, maybe there's some sort of platoon there. And obviously Vientos isn't looked at as the defender that, Beatty is. And Beatty's kind of transitioning into that McNeil-esque utility type of player for them this year. But if Benj doesn't make the team, then there are everyday reps in right field that are up for grabs. And I could see a scenario where a player like Beatty kind of settles in and is out there predominantly, but also is available to slide in and play other spots. But same thing, like, does Polanco figure it out at first? Maybe they end up wanting him more so at DH, and then first base is the spot that's open more on a daily basis. Also, middle of February, a lot of these conversations will change over the next several weeks, depending on health, depending on who's producing. I think that Beatty and Vientos will be in the big league picture. It's not like those guys are, going to go down to Double-A to start the year, but just how much they're going to be playing, that's what's up for grabs. And same thing with what we were talking about with Mauricio earlier. Like, those guys need reps if you really want them to achieve their potential. And, looking at the way that Beatty ended last year, it seems like he really broke out, and that's the version of him that they'll want moving forward. He was just displaced at third by bringing in Bichette, who's more of a proven commodity. For most of the offseason before Bichette came in, it was, okay, Beatty's the starting third baseman, right? So it's a transition for him. We'll see how he handles bringing all the different gloves out to defensive drills and trying that out. I'm very curious to see what happens with Vientos too, though, because when he was at his best in 2024, that's some prodigious power. I mean, it was easy to envision him being a fixture in the middle of the order moving forward. But obviously last year was a regression statistically. And obviously on defense, he was, if I'm not mistaken, one of the worst defensive third basemen in terms of different metrics in all of baseball. So it's a do or die time for him. And he's got to go out there this spring and show that he's recapturing that old form offensively.
It's crazy for Vientos that even in his worst season to still hit 17 homers and have over 60 RBIs on a lineup that is so on paper as stacked as the Mets is going to be interesting how he turns it around and if he can reclaim what he did in 2024. But the playing time for him is probably at a worse state than Brett Beatty, because I remember David Stern saying that he wanted to keep DH position something that's free in flux, and if he has to move a player here, Bo Bichette needs a day, he put him in there. With Vientos, he really only can play DH right now. Obviously at third base, you just mentioned, was not good at third base, hasn't really played first base, played shortstop in the minor leagues. So Vientos is in a tough situation. But when it comes to this infield, you look at Kai Correa and what he's going to do to help these guys out. It's a big task for him. But the fact that you have such a veteran and a guy who's won Gold Gloves and adding a Marcus Semien will help out, I feel like, immensely with these guys in learning the new positions on the job. He's a guy that, like you mentioned, he played shortstop, moved to second base. So if anyone knows what it's like to have to move from a position, that of strength, for him, it is Marcus Semien. Now he joined the camp with ease over this weekend, and I know and seen a lot of Met fans talk about, Semien's age, but I feel like he's going to be looking to prove a lot of people wrong, not only this spring but this season, that he's not, over the hill and done yet.
Absolutely. I mean, the age is one thing, but the defense that he's been producing since he made that transition over to second base has been consistently elite. I looked this up the other day, actually. Since he made that transition, only one other player in all of baseball at second base has produced more defensive runs saved and outs above average. So he's one of, if not the best second baseman in that span. And, these guys do decline over time, right? Like that will happen even more so for him. And I think when I look at his player profile, it's what are the Mets getting on offense? That's the real question, because he hasn't been the same player that he was when he had 2 top 3 MVP finishes just a couple of years ago. That feels like a distant memory at this point, looking at the way that he's hit for the Rangers in recent years. But, and we can have the same logic with Robert Jr. too. Semien was such a big, important piece for the Rangers, right? Him and Seager, they were the stars on that team. He comes over and he could be the 6th or 7th best hitter on this team, or most important piece in the lineup. It takes a lot of pressure off, and he can help this team score runs in a lot of different ways in terms of base running, getting the runner over, working quality at bats. I remember I asked Stearns, this has got to be a couple months ago at this point, one of those off-season availabilities, how comfortable he feels with the protection behind Juan Soto, because it's going to look very different. That was one of the parts of this Mets team last year that wasn't a problem, having Alonso right behind Soto in the order. That worked really well.
Yeah.
Now filling those shoes is easier said than done. But the way that Stearns answered that question is it's not just one hitter. It's really 1 through 9, 1 and then 3 through 9, depending on where Soto is, that the depth of the order, the turning the lineup over, having guys on base before Soto, or having a longer inning away from Soto, that all factors into the protection and making sure that Soto comes up in good spots and is able to, have good pitches to hit. So there are a lot of moving parts here, but I'm definitely keeping an eye on Semien, and it's also very fun to watch him take defensive drills because it's just so smooth. It's silky smooth out there. He's definitely fun to watch out there.
Yeah, he's a Gold Glover for a reason and a world champion. So he's bringing not only that presence, but the leadership that he brings to a team on and off the field. I think is something that was missing from this team. Maybe not everyone was 100% involved on being leaders on this team, but we know what Marcus Semien has been in clubhouses before, and I feel like he's going to be an added presence. Now, when you talk about the offense and all of those batters after, I mean, how many times last season did this team have the bases loaded, not with 2 outs, not with 1 out, but sometimes with no outs and come up empty. And it felt like, 6 through 9 or 5 through 9 was just, Death Valley, where after Alonso, you might as well have just ended the inning. So now that they have this more kind of a balanced lineup, and there's some ifs in there, right? Like if Francisco Alvarez can stay healthy, right? I mean, not most of it is his fault, because how many times did he get hit in the hand? But you have that, and you have, if like we mentioned, the Mark Vientos situation and the Beatty situation, and Robert Jr., if he can reclaim what he did in 2023. There are ifs, but it just does feel like this lineup is more balanced, and these guys are in spots that probably best suit them, where they're not going to be, not say that they're not going to be counted on, but the whole emphasis of the offense is not going to have to run through them. Whereas, you got Lindor, Soto, Bichette, even Polanco to a certain extent has a little bit of clutch gene in him. So it's nice to see that the offense kind of, like you said, balance out here.
Definitely. Polanco's runners and scoring position numbers are awesome. I discovered that looking through his stats from last season too. No, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, on other teams, a lot of these guys are hitting second or third, and they are so important to that team winning that game. And with the Mets, they're hitting 7th, they're hitting 8th on some days, and it's just going to put them in a better position to succeed. It is a good problem to have for the Mets if they have someone that should be hitting cleanup in another situation in the bottom of their order. That's an embarrassment of riches that you want out of your lineup. Then it turns into more of like the all-star game situation where guys who are hitting cleanup on other teams are batting ninth for the AL or NL. So it's a good problem to have, just like it's a good problem to have if everybody in the pitching staff stays healthy and then you have more than the amount of starters that you need.
Yeah, it's also very, very suitable for a kid like Carson Benj to come up and maybe come in bat ninth and not have to. Now he's going to play right field, so a little bit more of a comfortable position for him. So Carson Benj has a good spot for him if he can take hold of that right field spot. That obviously, there's other people that we're going to get into, and the reason why Carson Benj is going to have that opportunity is because Juan Soto is moving to left field, and he addressed the media as well today, and I kind of impressed with him because a lot of big time stars, big time players who get a lot of money, sometimes ego sets in. Juan Soto doesn't seem to be that type of player. He wants to do whatever it takes to help his team win, and the fact that he was willing to move to left field, and everyone was in agreement on it, from Mendoza to David Stearns. I felt like this, I didn't think it was going to happen this soon, but I'm glad that it happened now instead of waiting a couple of years and watching Soto struggle in right field. Because let's be honest, right field at Citi Field is not fun doesn't look like it's fun to play. So it's great to see Soto, be proactive and the Mets be proactive in getting this done. Obviously, he's going to play. A lot of this came about because he's going to play left field in the WBC. So glad that just everyone's on board with this whole situation.
I couldn't have envisioned Soto playing left field after watching him with the Yankees for that season, because left field in the Bronx is a beast in itself. So at that point, and mind you, I think it's worth noting and important to say that Soto's defensive metrics and the eye test, he's not necessarily a good defender, but it is important that he's putting the team first here. He's comfortable in all outfield spots. It's just a matter of, what the level of production is. He's got a good arm, but he has a lot of work to do out there. And he talked today about, the stolen bases, and his base running was a part of his game that progressed quite a bit last year. And he wants his defense to also improve. I mean, this guy's on a Hall of Fame track. He's one of the best hitters in the game over this last decade or so, however long he's been in the league at this point. But there are other parts of his game that definitely need to improve. So it sounds like the outfield position change kind of happened naturally over the course of the offseason. And, the fact that the other options that the Mets were looking at this offseason, play right field, Kyle Tucker, and that didn't work out. But they have other guys internally that can play in right field. I think Benj has played more in right than other outfield positions in his career, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe more than left at the very least. And Beatty's going to be in a new spot either way. So you got Tyrone Taylor as some insurance, as a fourth outfielder that can make some starts. And then MJ Melendez would be the other possibility if he has a great camp and maybe someone else in front of him gets hurt too. So I thought that if Soto was ever going to change positions for the Mets, it would be just going to DH. But it seems like this is a positive step for everybody involved.
Yeah, I thought too, because he was starting to take grounders at first base. So I was like, I wonder if at some point, because they did it with Bryce Harper, if they thought that maybe it would be time to start getting him acclimated at first base. But the fact that he wanted to move to left field, I saw someone post this on X, and I can't agree more. I mean, if Manny Ramirez can play left field, I mean, throwing Juan Soto in left field too probably won't be as bad. And you mentioned the guys that are going to be replacing right field. Carson Benj, kind of the inside track, if he can perform in spring training over the next month and a half here. You mentioned Brett Beatty. Tyrone Taylor, I think, is already going to be on this team no matter what. He's going to be either backing up or, like you mentioned, playing right field, and he'll give rest to Soto when need and all that stuff. But the interesting one is the guy they brought in about a week ago to me, and that's MJ Melendez, because this is a guy that was highly touted in the Kansas City Royals farm system as a catcher. Let's be fair, as a catcher. Went to the outfield, had some good offensive seasons, but over the last couple of years has really not lived up to the hype. So, I feel like it's a low risk, high reward type thing. This is another guy that, as we mentioned, he won't be asked to be the guy when he comes here on offense. And I'm very intrigued by MJ Melendez.
Yeah, me too. I remember covering the Yankees. He had some flashes against the Yankees over the years, and you're like, okay, I can see where those scouting reports were coming from with the power and the tools. But man, the only word to use when looking at his prospect status and the way those last couple of years with Kansas City went is disappointing. And I think that even he would understand that kind of assessment. I spoke to him the other day in the clubhouse, introduced myself, and what stood out to me was how he hasn't lost any belief in himself, even as he's, sunk to new lows. I mean, last year he spent almost the entire year in AAA, and in a small sample, 20 some odd games with the Royals, he hit 083. And this is a guy who was a consensus top 50 prospect in all of baseball, had to change positions because Salvador Perez wasn't going anywhere at catcher, and it just really hasn't panned out. So it's a new situation for him, in another organization. Now he's competing for a roster spot and isn't necessarily guaranteed a spot with the Royals as he was for many years. And it sounds like the Mets really believe in him. At least that's the way that he described it. And that's one of the reasons why he ended up with New York. But to a certain extent, even if he goes out there and rakes this spring, it's kind of out of his hands, right? I mean, you mentioned those other three names. They're all in front of him. And I think that you said it perfectly, that this is Benj's spot to lose in a way. Like if he shows that he's not ready, then the Mets can say, okay, let's give him a little bit more time. No harm, no foul. He'll go back to AAA. He's barely played in AAA, so it wouldn't hurt to have more seasoning there. But if he goes out and he plays really well and builds on the underlying metrics in AAA that they liked, despite his low average there and maybe some strikeout issues or whatever else, give him the starting job, right? Give him the runway, and he can go out there and show what he's capable of. So I saw a video on Twitter today, I think it was, that Melendez hit a homer off one of the non-roster invite relievers.
It was Joe Jakes, I think it was.
Yeah. There's some power there for sure. I think it's worth noting that with how we've kind of gone through the roster construction, Tyrone Taylor's a righty, Mark Vientos is a righty, and Luis Torrens is a righty. So ideally, your other guy on the bench is a left-handed hitter, and MJ Melendez is a left-handed hitter. So we'll see what happens.
I think it's good too. He's got I think he had a split contract, so he can go down to the minor leagues, which I think is, very good for what the Mets need, just in case. And one last thing when it comes to Carson Bench, I did find it interesting that, Juan Soto just mentioned him. Like, he's been talked about all offseason, and that's why I've just been so honed in on him winning this out of spring training and it being his job to lose, because right from the start, David Stearns was right on Carson Bench. He didn't mention any of the other prospects like Jet Williams, who had been in the before he got traded, had been a part of the organization, was on the rise, was the top prospect. And, Carson Bench comes in and he's now the first prospect in the Mets farm system, and that's who they're talking about bringing up right from the start. And then the fact that today, even in Juan Soto's press conference, when they're asking him, the move to left field, it's like, oh, we got this really good prospect in right field, and we're going to see what he's got. So I'm pretty impressed with what we've heard so far when it comes to Carson Bench.
I think that coming from someone in the clubhouse, it's also a good time to mention that Soto's locker is right next to Bench. So I think that Soto can be a resource for him as one of the best outfielders in baseball and potentially of this generation. Benj can pick his brain and just see what he can do to get better. And, I asked a follow-up to Soto today, like, what is it that he knows about Benj? And understandably, he said he's athletic and he hasn't heard too much about his offense, but he's looking forward to watching him a lot this spring, that he's a big-time prospect. And I think all eyes are going to be on Carson over these next several weeks. And, once he gets into games, because he really hasn't seen high-level pitching that much. But again, to go back to what I said earlier, the Mets like the underlying stuff from his production in AAA as much as you look at the slash line, and that's not what you would assume a player getting called up would be hitting in AAA. So it's not necessarily results in Grapefruit League play over the rest of this month into next month that's going to be the difference for Benj, though. I think that's important to say. They're going to be watching him on the field, seeing how he catches balls in drills and how he's fitting in with that group. It's not like he needs to hit 275 or higher in Grapefruit League games. Like, those games at the end of the day don't really matter. It's just getting that experience under his belt and seeing how he's handling things. But also the sense that I get learning more about him is that he is very capable to play in New York and have the pressure that comes with that position, going in and being that top guy called up, that the 0 for 4s, 0 for 5s don't get to him too much, that he's the kind of player that can bounce back, that let the tools, go out there and play your game, and it's going to result in results. So I think that it's really only a matter of when for him. It's not if he's going to have a big role with the Mets this season early on. Opening day, obviously the pomp and circumstance, you want him up there on game 1 facing Skeens in his first career at bat. That would be pretty cool. But it's only game 1, right? He could get called up the next week or the next month, and he's still going to be a key piece for this club in 2026.
How many times have we seen in the past players have good springs coming? Like Brett Beatty is the biggest example. Had great spring, comes up with the team to start on opening day, struggles, they send him down, got to bring him back up, and it's like a back and forth thing. So I assume that they're going to handle Carson Bench with as much care as possible, and when it is his time, he will be ready to go here. Before we get into the pitching, one other position player talk, Francisco Alvarez. I thought he looks great coming into spring. His importance at the plate has not been talked about enough since, the Mets kind of reshaped the lineup. I mean, he's really hasn't been talked about as much. I know to start the season, he'll probably be at the end of the lineup, but if he can regain that power that he had, that power potential, it will only make, I feel like, this offense that more potent than it currently is on paper.
Absolutely. It's in line with a lot of the stuff that we've already talked about, the ceiling of this offense, if certain guys can take a step forward. And I think Alvarez is an X factor in that conversation. And like you said, he's going to be in the bottom half, but I could see him hitting 4th for this team or even higher, depending on who's playing well and what the lefty righty balance is throughout Carlos Mendoza's lineup. The talent is very much there, right? I mean, we've seen flashes of it. He just hasn't put it together for a full season. He hasn't been able to stay healthy. But this isn't a situation of, like Melendez, right? Like he's only been declining since getting called up as a top prospect, and he really hasn't put much together. I mean, Alvarez has been pretty darn good for stretches. It's just turning a couple months into a full season, and then all of a sudden he's one of the best hitting catchers in all of baseball. I admittedly don't know too much about his defensive outlook. I don't think the metrics look too glamorous, but he's got a good arm back there, and he's going to. I mentioned it off the top, the fact that he's already spending a lot of time with Peralta and building that relationship. That's an important battery for them this year. And it also sounds like he's slimmed down a lot, best shape of your life. That's the storyline with a lot of players these days coming back from the off season. So that's only good news. You want him to stay healthy, and you want him to be in a position to succeed.
I think the positive for him defensively is the fact that, his pitch framing is good, and the all of the pitchers seem to work so well with him. Obviously he can work on throwing runners out, but if they can somehow get him to stay healthy and, like you said, get that power going, I mean, this is a whole different ballgame. I mean, he was the number 1 overall prospect in baseball, or was it around 2022, 2023? So to see him stay healthy is another thing. Obviously, Luis Torrens is there. The Mets picked up Austin Barnes, and even as Tony, shout out to Tony in the chat, mentioned earlier, the Mets picked up Ben Rortvedt. I hope I said his last name right, Rortvedt, right? If he's coming from the Yankees. He was in the Dodgers, but he was coming from the Yankees as well. So, the Mets have a Hayden Sanger too, so they have a plethora of catchers, backup catchers. But if they could get Alvy going, I think that would be even bigger than having all those guys be a part of the team. Now let's move to the pitching here, because getting a little early look at this rotation. Obviously, Nolan McLean as well as Clay Holmes. Clay Holmes was like this last season too, where he was doing the 3-ups already and they were already prepared. And that was a little bit different because both him and Nolan McLean are going to be in the WBC, so they have to be a little bit more ready and in advance with what the challenges are to come here when it comes to playing in this WBC. What have you seen that you have liked so far from their bullpen sessions?
Well, both of those guys are already throwing 3-ups in live sessions. So as you alluded to, they're a lot further along on February 15th than the normal, run of the mill pitcher is at this point. Obviously you want them to stay healthy and ease into things and be smart with their workload. McLean's going into what will be his first full season at the big league level. You got to be careful there, make sure that he's not overexerting himself too early. I mean, man, an injury there with one of those two pitchers would be devastating for this rotation, as much as they do have a surplus of starters. And I think that there's a lot of upside with the depth that they have, going down to Jonah Tong and Christian Scott. Maybe Tobias Myers ends up making some starts for them. He's already being stretched out just in case. And they have 6 healthy starters as of right now. So in theory, they would be able to offset the loss of one of them. But man, I mean, you need Peralta and McLean to be that 1-2 punch to carry this rotation this year, but not just the regular season. I mean, you need those guys pitching in playoff series too, if this team wants to go where they believe that they're capable of going. So I think that Holmes will be a lot better this season. He's got the first year as a starter under his belt already. I was catching up with him in the clubhouse, and he was telling me the pros and cons of what he likes about being a starter versus when I covered him when he was the closer with the Yankees. And I think that he's in a good headspace in terms of what to expect now with that full season under his belt. But you talk about X factors. I mean, if Kodai Senga pitches like he did as a rookie, this rotation is all of a sudden one of the best in the National League. I think it's fair to say, but that is far from a guarantee based off of how Senga's last couple of years have gone. I know the injury where he got hurt trying to catch the ball at first is fluky, but at the end of last year, he got sent down, right? I mean, like the production wasn't there. So we definitely need to keep an eye on how his spring goes, and then what his role and Peterson's role are when the season begins. Because if they have 6 starters, sure, they could start with a 6-man, but a 6-man starts away from your 1 and 2 also, and you're going to want Peralta and McLean out there as much as possible. So I didn't mention Sean Manaea yet. I mean, he's a big piece too. He had a disappointing year last year. And in the past, he's been an ace caliber starter in other uniforms. So they need all of those 6 guys to produce at a high level, because they're going to lean on them a lot this year.
Green Machine in the chat saying, as you mentioned, Sean Manaea, a healthy Sean Manaea would go a long way toward making this rotation stronger if he can tap back into what he did in 2024 after dealing with the injuries last year. That's a huge plus. And, obviously he changed his arm angle, more of a Chris Sale type arm angle, and it helped him out a lot in 2024. I feel like he was never fully healthy last season, even having to come back a little early with all the injuries and the issues that this rotation dealt with. Having to bring back Sean Manaea a little bit too early was definitely not the right move. But as you mentioned, Kodai Senga, and I said this on another live stream that I was a part of, another Mets live stream, that to me, he is the X factor, like you mentioned, on the mound. I mean, the talent that comes out of that arm. And I had Keith Rad from Mets Radio on last week talking about him as well. Everyone talks about the talent that comes out of Kodai Senga's arm is enough to be, it could be an ace type talent if he could just stay healthy and keep himself, get out of his own head sometimes, because it feels like sometimes he's in his own head when it comes to mechanics and all that stuff. But the guy's got so much talent in the world. And if he could just hone in on that and stay healthy, I think that'll be great. When it comes to Sean Manaea, Kodai Senga, and David Peterson, who do you think has the biggest bounce back? Like in your eyes, who do you think could have the biggest bounce back?
I feel like it's got to be Manaea, right? And he's more of a proven commodity in terms of what he's done at the big league level and being a top of the rotation type of starter. I mean, Peterson, you look at last year and he was an all-star, but the second half wasn't as good. And I mean, if I'm not mistaken, he's the longest tenured player in the Mets clubhouse now, which is kind of wild and a testament to all the turnover that's happened over these last several years. So he's been around a long time. This is his last year before free agency. He's going to want to go out there and pitch well. Obviously, everyone wants to go out and perform at a high level, but that's even more the case for him. One little nugget on Senga, because this is indirectly something I'm working on right now, but a Devin Williams story. I was talking to the Mets' new pitching coach, Justin Willard, today, and talking about the changes that Devin is making with his arsenal to make sure that his changeup, the airbender pitch, is able to succeed more, because that wasn't as effective this last year with the Yankees. When you have a pitch named after you, obviously the opposing team is going to game plan for that pitch. And so Senga is the same kind of situation, right? Obviously, you know what's coming, what his best pitch is going to be in the ghost fork. So he has to make sure that the rest of his arsenal and repertoire is up to snuff so that he can go to other pitches, change the angle, change the speed, so that a hitter doesn't just sit for that one pitch and then demolish it when the pitcher makes a mistake. So it's a big spring for him. But at the end of the day, we can talk about the X's and O's as much as we want. He needs to just stay healthy. And that's the trend from all off season long, that the Mets view him as like, we can't count on him to make 30 starts. He has to prove to us that he can actually stay healthy. And at that point, like you said, the talent will set in and he'll start to produce.
I felt that was interesting during David Stearns' press conference. He talked about Tobias Myers and the willingness to have him stretched out to be a starter. Now, 2024, he was 9-6. He had a 3 ERA in 25 games started. The Mets knew him very well in that final weekend of the season. He beat the Mets, and then in the wild card, he almost he pitched 6 shutout innings before the whole issue with Devin Williams and Pete Alonso happened. So he took care of business against them, and we saw the talent that he had there. I feel like it's nice to have a young, versatile pitcher, and he'll be that kind of important bridge, that I guess that middleman, maybe long reliever that, no matter what his role is, whether it's in the rotation or the bullpen, he can come out and he's got the talent to do that.
Maybe this is just me, Anthony, but it's almost like reminiscent of the early stages of Luke Weaver's tenure with the Yankees, where he was that multi-inning type of bridge, or even let's go back to Michael King too, the guy that can come in and shut a lineup down for 3 innings in relief, but also if some starter gets hurt last minute, you could throw him out there because he's still stretched out and could give you 5 innings and has experience as a starter. So I haven't watched Myers pitch too much in his career. He threw live the other day. It's very early on, so I'm curious to see how he looks in a game setting and what he's working on this spring. But that's not just the throwaway in that Peralta deal. I mean, obviously, Freddie is the centerpiece that you're getting back, and the reason why the Mets had to give up the top prospects that they did. But there's a chance that Myers ends up being a real force for them in a versatile role, where you lose one of your big starters and there's upside that he could be just as good in the rotation, or the rotation stays healthy and you've got a guy that your starter goes 5, you can throw Myers in for 6, 7, 8, and then it makes the rest of the bullpen get some rest, and you put your closer in a better situation. So that's very much like a modern bullpen type of role for maybe a guy who has starting experience. And we'll see how he does. He can handle pitching in the playoffs. I think, as you mentioned, he's been there before, and that can't hurt.
There's always this talk about, there being a 6-man rotation. I mean, it's been like that for so long for the Mets, and when they try to implement it, it just never comes to fruition because, there's always injuries or, something happens that, stops them from doing that. So every time I hear a 6-man rotation, I'm just like, I feel like at some point we're going to end up going with 5, and whoever's not in the rotation will either be in the bullpen or they're going to send down. I mean, there's, Jonah Tong is another name that will get some time, in AAA, as well as Christian Scott. They'll be waiting in the wings and ready for when the Mets need them. So the Mets have depth there. I just, it'll be hard for me to see a 6-man rotation until it actually happens. From the chat here, Armand is Amazing has a question for you saying, Ken Rosenthal reported that teams have called the Rays about left-handed pitcher Garrett Clevenger. Would the Mets be interested in him? And does he have any minor league options?
Okay, interesting. I think that the left-handed pitcher in the bullpen question is definitely worth noting, whether it's Clevenger or anybody else. Do the Mets have enough there? Because AJ Minter's not going to start the regular season on time. So correct me if I'm wrong, but Brooks Raley is really the only lock to be in the pen in terms of lefties. Brian Hudson comes over from, he's only one full season removed from being in Milwaukee and being a really good reliever for them. Nate Lavender, there are some non-roster guys that could potentially really click this spring, but David Stern says that he's never done, right? So if somebody out there that can potentially help is up for grabs, I wouldn't put it past him. I think that, pencils are never down until the trade deadline in that sense. So they're going to try to make this team better. I will say, though, that Minter is looking really good. And, Mendoza was talking about him and how the ball is coming out of his hand effortlessly already with ease, that he's in a good spot. They're not going to rush him back. But when I talked to Minter, he was saying, he's a competitor. He wants to be back as soon as possible. So the target there is like late April, but probably more so early May for him. And man, he was really good before he got hurt last year. So you start to think of that high leverage crew, setting the table for Devin Williams in the 9th. And mind you, closers nowadays can also sometimes pitch in the 8th or 7th, depending on, when the meat of the lineup is going to be up there. So if you can have Weaver, Minter, Raley, it's never going to hurt to have more options. But I think that the upside there is you've got Minter and Raley as two lefties that you can really rely on. If somebody else is out there, I definitely wouldn't put it past him, though.
Absolutely. And as we wrap up the show, let's look at the bullpen. It's so weird seeing Devin Williams and Luke Weaver in a Mets uniform, but I like it. I mean, I think it's good that they were able to offset losing Edwin Diaz and bringing in a guy like Devin Williams, who was probably one of the best closers in all of baseball for a 4 or 5 year span. I mean, outside of that home run to Alonso, outside of that first, half with the Yankees, he's been one of the better closers in all of baseball. And then you got Luke Weaver, who has closers experience as well, and he can be the setup man. I like, you were covering the Yankees, so you're going to get a double dose of them.
Yeah, they're not getting rid of me just yet. I'm definitely looking forward to continuing to spend time with those guys, and Clay Holmes too, and Soto. There's a lot of ex-Yankees in that room. Ben Rortvedt, very nice guy from his brief stints with the Yankees. So look, I mean, the upside with Weaver and Williams is you're getting two elite level late inning relievers, and I think that the upside with Williams is top 3 closer in the game. I don't know if he's going to be that good again, but if you're a Mets fan out there listening to this or watching this, and you didn't really follow the Yankees last year, and you go and you look at Williams's numbers, you see, oh my gosh, that was the worst season of his career. He definitely struggled quite a bit, and that transition to the pinstripes, which weigh heavy, just like a Mets uniform will, it didn't go according to plan. But there's a lot of underlying numbers and a lot of underlying metrics that would suggest that he was getting unlucky throughout that season, and that he did pitch well at an elite level for extended stretches during that year. So that's not me saying he was actually really good last year, because the results weren't there and he didn't close like the plan was when he came over and was considered, the top reliever in all of baseball. But having a year under his belt in terms of being in New York and having that routine, knowing where he wants to go get his bagel in the morning, that kind of stuff goes a long way, coming from, Milwaukee to going to New York. I think that he'll be in a better position to succeed this season because of that year under his belt, and also the changes he's making with his arsenal. I started talking about that earlier, but having a slider and then also a cutter to go along with the fastball changeup. Now guys can't just sit on the change. They have other pitches they got to worry about. And if he can make sure those offerings are legit, they don't have to be as good as the changeup, but as long as a hitter knows that he has to keep that in the back of his mind, it's going to do wonders for him this year.
Yeah, and I have confidence that he will somewhat regain the form that he was when he was in Milwaukee. I mean, we dealt with this with Edwin Diaz in his first season. I mean, he had so many blown saves and pretty much cost the team a playoff spot in 2019. And he came back 2022, had a big year, 2024 and 25. He was a whole lot better. And I feel like Devin Williams could be the same. Now, you answered that second part of the question, but the first part of Green Machine's question, what do you think is the best strength or the biggest strength Luke Weaver brings to the pen, being that you've covered him across town?
Well, for one, the spunky personality and what he brings to a clubhouse. He is a very unique individual and very silly. I love talking to him. I know a lot of other reporters in the industry do as well. If you haven't seen the clip, he refers to himself as a ferocious jungle cat. So there's definitely a vibe to him that you want in the bullpen. Those guys are sitting out there for hours and hours every day together. He can lighten the mood, but also he's got some whats. He can go out there with the game on the line. That Yankees 2024 World Series run, they wouldn't have gotten as far as they did without him. He was instrumental and came up so big for them on the biggest stage with one of the biggest teams in the world. And that's coming from, like we've talked about with other former top prospects on this show already, he really didn't pan out as a starter. I mean, he was the centerpiece in the Paul Goldschmidt trade, if you go all the way back between the Cardinals and the Diamondbacks. So for him to revive his career in this new role, change up his arsenal, change up his delivery a little bit, he could be primed for a big bounce back too, because he dealt with some pitch tipping issues. And then the injury that he had, if I remember correctly, it was a hamstring last summer. If he comes in healthy, makes some changes, gets ready to dominate again, that could be a pretty potent 1-2 punch in the back end.
Now, to wrap up the show, minor news and happenings with this team. Ryan Clifford is out there playing at first base and getting sometimes he'll be at AAA to start. Uncle Ted saying Ryan Clifford's about to be a monster. Forget Alonso. Clifford is the man. We'll see if that is true. But it's nice to see him getting his opportunity to start at AAA. Last season, he had a 237 batting average, but he had 29 homers, had 93 RBIs, and 826 OPS in between AA and AAA. This is a good problem for the Mets to have, to me. You have Polanco, who has not really played first base. So, I don't know how this pans out, but it's a possibility that we could see Ryan Clifford sooner rather than later.
I feel like we'll see him this year at some point, right? I mean, if he's starting in AAA, he's already got experience there. The bat certainly plays from what I've seen online, right? I mean, I'm looking forward to watching him hit this season. You can never have too much talent ready to go in Syracuse. And even after trading Jet Williams away and the non-Carson Benj top prospects in terms of position players, there's a pretty hefty list right there. And a lot of different guys that I'm keeping an eye on this spring. Ewing, Reimer, Morabito, the list goes on. So there's a reason why this Mets team has one of the best farm systems in all of baseball in terms of different rankings from different publications. They certainly believe in their guys internally. I do think we'll see Clifford, and that's what you want out of a big market club where the Mets can go out and pay big money to have guys go up and impact the big league club, but you're also developing talent that either you're going to have those guys take on a role like Benj is, or you're going to trade them away and make the big league club better by getting somebody else's all-star to come in like they just did with Jet Williams and Brandon Sproat. So there's a lot of young talent. I mean, AAA Syracuse is going to be the team to watch once this team breaks camp. There will be a lot of talented players up there, just one step away from going to Flushing.
Hey, it's what the Dodgers did to become the dynasty that they're becoming right now. And the Mets want to be the East Coast Dodgers. So it's nice to, like you said, be able to spend the money, but also have that pipeline ready to go. Max, thanks so much for joining the show. I really appreciate your time. Let everyone know what you got coming up, what you're working on, and what you got going down there in Port St. Lucie.
Ooh, what do I have going on? I'm just trying to get as much sleep as I can, introduce myself to everybody at Mets camp. Think of all the new faces. Everybody basically is a new face for me. But I'm having a blast so far. Trying to make sure I don't go to Publix every single day. I do go quite a bit. I believe I've gone 3 of the first 6 days since getting here, and I'm not ashamed to reveal that information. So, I'm enjoying life down here, eating some good food, working on a bunch of fun stories that'll come out soon. We're going to have a YouTube channel too. So keep an eye out for that. But follow me on on Twitter, Max T Goodman. And, I'm trying to post as many videos as I can and make myself known for all the Mets fans out there, because I am still new on the beat and ingratiating myself.
Well, I'm going to emphasize on this last comment that Master Flip is saying. Shout out to Max for the content out there at spring training. All the videos that you post, great stuff, great work. Great to have you in Queens this season. Hope to see you out there at the game. Appreciate you, Max. And yeah, man, this is going to be a lot of fun. This is going to be a fun season with the Mets.
Thanks for having me, Anthony. I appreciate it. Have a good rest of your night. All right.
All right, you take care. All right, that's Max Goodman. So great to have him on the show. We'll have him on again at some point. But that wraps up the Subway to Shea podcast. Shout out to everyone who was a part of the chat, who was a part of the room. Appreciate every single one of you for being here tonight. You can follow me on X, Instagram, and TikTok at Subway to Shea. You can follow me personally at Rivera86. And subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. You could do that if you want to listen to the audio format, which will be up a little bit later on. But if you want to be a part of the chat, you want to be in the conversation, you're doing that on YouTube. So that wraps up Subway to Shea podcast for this week. We'll be back next week. But for now, it's always Let's Go Mets.